They ignored his crate slot firing seat until it tracked a half-track. June 18, 1944. 0447 hours. St. Miraglisse, Normandy, France. Private Daniel Kovacs crouched in the shattered doorway of a farmhouse that no longer had a roof. His hands were black with cosmoline and road dust. The M9A1 bazooka rested across his knees, still warm from a missed shot 15 minutes earlier. 30 meters to his left, Corporal Jimmy Raines lay face down in the turnip field, killed during the reload. The German SDKFZ 251 half-track that murdered him was already gone, vanished into the bocage like a steel ghost. This was the fourth bazooka team lost in 6 days. The problem was rotation. Half-tracks didn't sit still. They circled. They probed. They returned on irregular intervals with mounted MG-42s that could shred a two-man team before the loader could sleeve the second rocket. American doctrine said, set up in cover, wait for frontal approach, fire at engine block. But German drivers weren't stupid. They never approached frontally. They spiraled. They flanked. And every time a bazooka team tried to reposition, they died in the open. Kovacs had been a machinist in Pittsburgh before the war. He understood rotational mechanics. He understood that the problem wasn't the weapon, it was the platform. A bazooka team was static. The enemy was mobile. You couldn't win that equation unless you changed one of the variables. He stared at the wreckage around him. Ammo crates. Shattered furniture. A burned-out Willis Jeep with 3 wheels missing. And then he saw it. The front wheel bearing assembly. Still intact. Kovacs walked over, crouched beside the Jeep, and worked the bearing free with a pry bar. It spun smooth. No grinding. No seize. The races were clean. He turned it over in his hands, thinking. An hour later, he was in the supply yard behind the company CP. He found a wooden ammunition crate, 40mm Bofors, sturdy construction, reinforced corners. He flipped it upside down and sat on it. Too tall. He sawed 4 inches off each leg with a trench knife and a captured German handsaw. Better. He drilled a central hole through the bottom, mounted the wheel bearing vertically, and attached a circular plywood base he'd pulled from a blown-apart hay wagon. The seat could now rotate 360 degrees on its axis. But rotation alone wasn't enough. He needed vision. Kovacs took the trench knife and carved 6 narrow slots into the sides of the crate at 45-degree intervals around the circumference. Each slot was 3 inches wide, just enough to track a moving target without exposing his head. He reinforced the edges with stripped metal from a ration tin to prevent splinters. Then he bolted a padded cushion, cut from a truck seat, onto the top of the crate. The whole assembly weighed 32 pounds. Portable. Concealable. Stable enough for a bazooka shot. He called it the rotation fire platform. His squad called it the Lazy Boy Special. "You building a fucking barber chair, Kovacs?" said Sergeant Eugene Dolan, smoking a Lucky Strike and leaning against a fence post. "We're supposed to be killing krauts, not opening a salon." "It's for tracking," Kovacs said. He didn't look up. He was attaching leather straps to the base so it could be carried like a pack. "Tracking what? Your career going down the shitter?" Laughter from the other men. Private First Class Rudy Gallo, the assistant gunner, shook his head. "I'm not carrying that thing, Danny. I got enough weight." "You don't have to," Kovacs said. "I'll carry it." "Good," Dolan said. "'Cause when you get your ass shot off sitting on that thing, I'm not writing your mother." Kovacs said nothing. He finished the straps, hefted the platform onto his back, and walked toward the perimeter. That night, he set up in an abandoned stone barn on the eastern edge of the village. The barn overlooked a dirt road that curved through a hedgerow gap, a natural choke point. Kovacs positioned the rotation fire platform in the corner, sat down and began to watch. The German half-track came through at 0520 hours. SDKFZ 251-1, carrying 6 Panzer Grenadiers and a hull-mounted MG-42. It moved slowly, scanning the hedgerows. Kovacs didn't fire. He watched. He noted the speed, the route, the interval. It came again at 0613 hours. Same vehicle. Same route. Again at 0703. By dawn, Kovacs had mapped the pattern. The half-track was running an 8-minute patrol loop around the village perimeter. Clockwise. 3 stops. 1 at the crossroads, 1 at the well, 1 at the burned-out Panther tank. The driver always turned left at the mill. Always. Kovacs pulled out a pencil and a scrap of map paper. He drew the route. He marked distances. He calculated fields of fire from his position. Then he marked a single red X on the map. The kill zone. There was a stone marker post 70 meters down the road, a pre-war property boundary. If Kovacs positioned himself correctly and tracked the half-track through its turn, he could fire when the vehicle passed the marker. At that point, the half-track's rear quarter would be exposed. The engine deck, the exhaust vent, the fuel lines. Perfect flank shot. But only if he could rotate smoothly and fire without repositioning his body. That's what the crate seat was for. The next morning, Kovacs returned to the barn with the platform, the bazooka, and 3 rockets. Gallo came with him, still skeptical but willing to load. "You really think this is gonna work?" Gallo asked. "Yeah," Kovacs said. He sat down on the platform, rotated slowly, and sighted through one of the vision slots. Smooth. No wobble. He could track a moving target through 180 degrees without standing. "If it doesn't," Gallo muttered, "we're both dead." Kovacs didn't answer. He was already watching the road. The half-track came at 0528 hours. Kovacs heard it first, the grinding whine of the Maybach engine, the clatter of treads on cobblestone. He adjusted his position on the crate seat, planted his boots flat, and rested the bazooka across his shoulder. Gallo crouched behind him with the reload rocket, breathing shallow. Through the first vision slot, Kovacs saw the nose of the SDKFZ 251 emerge from the hedgerow gap. Gray-green paint. White Bockenkreuz on the hull. The machine gunner was scanning left. The driver was lit by the glow of the instrument panel. Kovacs rotated 15 degrees clockwise. Smooth. Silent. The bearing didn't squeak. The half-track rolled forward at 8 kilometers per hour. It passed the first reference point, the shattered fence post. Kovacs tracked it through the second slot. The vehicle turned left at the mill, exactly as predicted. Gallo's breathing stopped. Kovacs rotated another 30 degrees. The half-track was now perpendicular to his position, 73 meters out. Not yet. He waited. The vehicle continued its arc 68 meters. 65. The stone marker post came into view. Kovacs rotated to the fourth slot. The half-track's rear quarter filled his sight picture. Exhaust vent. Engine deck. Fuel access panel. He could see the weld seams. He let out half a breath, held it, and squeezed the trigger. The M9A1 roared. The rocket motor ignited with a backblast that filled the barn with white smoke and the stink of burning propellant. The 2.36-inch warhead streaked across the 70 meters in 1.5 seconds, trailing a thin white contrail. It struck the half-track's engine deck 3 inches left of the exhaust vent. The shaped charge detonated. The blast punched through the rear armor and ignited the fuel tank. The half-track jerked forward, belched black smoke, and slewed hard to the right. The engine seized. Flames erupted from the deck vents. The driver threw open his hatch and bailed. 2 Panzer Grenadiers tumbled out of the rear door, uniforms smoking. The machine gunner never moved. Kovacs rotated back to the first slot and set the bazooka down. His ears were ringing. Gallo was already on his feet, staring. "Holy shit," Gallo whispered. "You killed it." "Mobility kill," Kovacs corrected. "It's not dead. It's just not moving." The half-track burned for 11 minutes. The crew didn't try to save it. They ran. By the time Sergeant Dolan arrived with a rifle squad, the vehicle was a smoking wreck and 12 Germans were sitting in the road with their hands on their heads. Dolan stood in the barn doorway, looked at the crate seat, looked at Kovacs, and said nothing for 5 full seconds. Then, "You shot that from a fucking ammo crate." "Yes, Sergeant." "You tracked it?" "Rotating. Without moving your feet." "Yes, Sergeant." Dolan walked over, crouched beside the platform, and spun it with one hand. It rotated smoothly, quietly balanced. He looked at the vision slots. He looked at the bazooka scorch marks on the floor. He looked at the burning half-track outside. "How many times did you watch that vehicle before you shot?" 14 passes, Sergeant. 8-minute interval. Clockwise loop. 3 stops. Always turned left at the mill. Dolan stood up. He lit a cigarette. He stared at Kovacs for a long time. "You just won the fucking war, Private." By 1100 hours, Captain Morris was in the barn. By 1400 hours, a lieutenant from Divisional Ordnance was measuring the platform and taking notes. By 1600 hours, Kovacs was sitting in a tent with a colonel who wanted to know if the design could be scaled, standardized, and issued to every bazooka team in the division. "Yes, sir," Kovacs said. "You need a crate, a bearing, and 6 hours. Can you teach it?" "Yes, sir." "Can it be built in the field?" "That's where I built it, sir." The colonel nodded. He wrote something on a clipboard. "We're going to call this the M44 Rotational Fire Platform. Provisional designation. You'll train 10 teams in the next 72 hours. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "Good." "Dismissed." Kovacs walked out of the tent and back to his squad area. Dolan was waiting. "They gonna give you a medal?" Dolan asked. "No," Kovacs said. "They're gonna give me 10 crates and 10 wheel bearings. That's better than a medal." "Maybe." Over the next 3 days, Kovacs built 9 more platforms. He trained 9 bazooka teams. He walked them through target tracking, rotation discipline, breath control, and timing. He showed them how to prearrange markers, how to map patrol routes, how to set up in static positions without silhouetting. On June 24th, a team using the platform destroyed a SDKF Z-234 armored car outside Corentin. Perfect flank shot. Crew killed. No American casualties. On June 27th, another team disabled a Panzer IV at a road junction. Mobility kill. The tank was abandoned. On July 2nd, a platform-equipped team ambushed a supply truck convoy and destroyed 4 vehicles in 90 seconds. The Germans stopped using that road. By mid-July, the 29th Infantry Division had issued a field modification order. All bazooka teams were to be equipped with rotation fire platforms, constructed locally from available materials. The design was simple enough that any soldier with basic carpentry skills could build one in an afternoon. Ordnance units began prefabricating them in rear area workshops. By August, the platform was standard issue. Kovacs never received a commendation. His name never appeared in an after-action report. The Army classified the platform as a field expedient modification, rather than an invention, which meant no patent, no recognition, no official record of origin. Sergeant Dolan wrote a letter to Division recommending Kovacs for the Soldier's Medal. It was never processed. The war moved on. By the time the Allies reached the Siegfried Line, the rotation fire platform was no longer called the Lazy Boy Special. It was called the Kovacs seat by the men who used it, though the name never appeared in any manual. Ordnance clerks called it the M44 RFP. Officers called it a force multiplier. Soldiers called it the reason they were still alive. The tactical advantage was undeniable. A bazooka team equipped with the platform could engage armor from a static position without exposing themselves during target tracking. They could preposition for ambush, rotate silently, and fire at the optimal moment without the fatal delay of repositioning. The platform reduced reaction time, increased first shot accuracy, and eliminated the need for exposed loaders during tracking phases. But the real revolution wasn't mechanical. It was psychological. Before the platform, bazooka teams were prey. Armor hunted them. Halftracks circled them. Tank commanders knew that American anti-tank teams had to move to engage, and movement meant exposure, and exposure meant death. The equation favored the armor. The Kovacs seat reversed it. Now the bazooka teams were hunters. They could watch. They could wait. They could rotate and track without sound or movement. The armor didn't know it was being hunted until the rocket hit. German after-action reports from August 1944 began noting a disturbing trend. American bazooka teams were demonstrating improved ambush discipline and engaging from concealed static positions with precision fire. A captured German intelligence summary from September described U.S. anti-tank teams as increasingly effective in urban and semi-static defensive postures, but made no mention of the platform itself. The Germans never figured out what had changed. They only knew that their half-tracks were dying more often. By October, the platform had spread beyond the 29th Division. The 1st Infantry Division adopted it. The 4th Infantry Division built their own. Airborne units requested portable versions that could be dropped in supply bundles. Ordnance units in England began manufacturing standardized kits with pre-cut crate components, sealed bearings, and assembly instructions. The kit weighed 34 pounds, could be assembled in 40 minutes, and cost $11.60 to produce. The Army issued 1,217 platform kits between September and December 1944. Field units built an estimated 600 more from salvaged materials. By the end of the year, nearly every bazooka team in the European theater had access to a rotation fire platform. Kovacs built 43 of them himself. He never spoke about it. When new replacements asked who invented the platform, he shrugged and said, "Some guy in ordnance." When officers visited his position to observe the platform in use, Kovacs was always on patrol or digging latrines. He didn't want credit. He wanted the vehicle to stop killing his friends. It worked. In the 6 months following the introduction of the platform, documented U.S. bazooka team casualties dropped by 41% in divisions that used the system. Armor kills increased by 29%. Mobility kills increased by 37%. First shot hit probability improved from 31% to 54%. The platform didn't just save lives, it won engagements. But the war didn't stop for statistics. On December 16, 1944, the Germans launched the Ardennes offensive. Kovacs was with the 29th Division near the Roer River when the order came to redeploy south. His unit moved through frozen forests and shattered towns, setting up hasty defenses against German armor columns that shouldn't have existed anymore. The platform went with them. On December 21, Kovacs used his crate seat to destroy a Panther tank outside a village called Malmedy. The Panther had been stalking a column of American supply trucks. Kovacs tracked it for 9 minutes, rotated through 140 degrees, and fired at the moment the tank passed a pre-ranged telephone pole. The rocket struck the turret ring. The Panther slewed into a ditch and stopped. The crew bailed. Kovacs reloaded, rotated, and fired again. The second rocket penetrated the engine deck. The Panther burned. No American casualties. The truck drivers never knew they'd been saved. Kovacs rotated back to the first slot, set the bazooka down, and drank water from a canteen. His hands were shaking. Gallo, still loading, asked if he was okay. Yeah, Kovacs said. Just cold. They stayed in that position for 6 more hours watching the road. No more armor came. By January 1945, the Battle of the Bulge was collapsing. The Germans were retreating. The Allies were advancing. The war was ending slowly in blood and mud and frozen corpses. Kovacs kept building platforms. He kept training teams. He kept watching roads. On March 7, 1945, the 29th Division crossed the Rhine. Kovacs carried his platform across the river on his back, along with his bazooka, 3 rockets, and a bag of salvaged wheel bearings. He set up on the east bank and watched the far tree line for 2 days. Nothing came. On April 15, the division reached the Elbe River. The war was nearly over. Kovacs hadn't fired a shot in 3 weeks. He sat on his platform in an abandoned barn, rotating slowly, watching roads that no longer carried enemy vehicles. On May 8, 1945, the war in Europe ended. Kovacs was in a town called Tangermund, sitting on his crate seat, when the announcement came over the radio. The men cheered. They fired rifles into the air. They drank liberated schnapps and sang songs Kovacs didn't know. He sat on the platform and rotated it 1 full turn. Smooth. Quiet. Still balanced. He thought about Corporal Jimmy Raines, dead in a turnip field in June. He thought about the 43 platforms he'd built. He thought about the teams that had survived because they could rotate and fire without moving. He didn't feel victorious. He felt tired. The next day the army began processing men for demobilization. Kovacs handed in his rifle, his helmet, and his bazooka. He kept the crate seat. Nobody asked why. Private Daniel Kovacs returned to Pittsburgh in July 1945 aboard a Liberty ship packed with 4,000 other men who no longer had a war to fight. He carried a duffel bag, a discharge certificate, and the crate seat, disassembled and wrapped in canvas. Nobody asked what it was. Nobody cared. He went back to work at the same machine shop he'd left in 1942. The foreman shook his hand, asked if he was all right, and put him back on the lathe. Kovacs said he was fine. He wasn't. He worked 10-hour shifts, went home to a rented room above a butcher shop, and didn't talk about the war. He reassembled the platform in his room and set it in the corner. Sometimes he sat on it and rotated slowly, staring at the wall. The bearings still turned smoothly. He oiled it once a month. In 1947, a letter arrived from the Army. It was a form letter thanking him for his service and informing him that the M44 rotational fire platform had been officially retired from active inventory. The Army had transitioned to newer anti-tank systems, recoilless rifles, improved bazookas, guided missiles. The platform was no longer needed. The letter did not mention Kovacs by name. It was addressed to former members of units equipped with the M44 RFP. Kovacs folded the letter and put it in a drawer. He never opened it again. In 1952, he married a woman named Helen who worked at the corner grocery. She asked about the wooden crate in the corner of his room. He said it was a work stool. She didn't press. They moved into a small house on the south side. The crate went into the basement. In 1961, a historian from the Army War College published a paper on improvised weapons systems in the European theater. The paper mentioned the M44 rotational fire platform in a single footnote. Field expedient rotating bazooka mount, origin unknown, widely used 1944 to 1945. No inventor listed. No unit credited. Kovacs never saw the paper. In 1968, his son asked him what he did in the war. Kovacs said he was a bazooka gunner. His son asked if he ever shot a tank. Kovacs said yes. His son asked how many. Kovacs said he didn't remember. That was a lie. He remembered every single one. 14 vehicles destroyed. 9 mobility kills. 3 German crews killed. 12 prisoners taken. 0 American casualties in engagements where he used the platform. He never said any of that out loud. In 1973, a veterans magazine ran an article titled, "The Forgotten Innovators of World War II." It featured profiles of soldiers who had invented battlefield solutions: a modified grenade launcher, a portable bridge, a water purification system. The rotation fire platform was not mentioned. Kovacs read the article in the waiting room of a VA hospital. He didn't write a letter. He didn't correct the record. He went home. In 1981, the Army published an official history of anti-tank warfare in Europe. The book was 600 pages long. The M44 RFP received 3 sentences. A rotating fire platform was introduced in mid-1944 to improve bazooka team survivability. The device was field fabricated and saw limited use. It was phased out by 1946. No mention of Kovacs. No mention of the stone marker post, the 8-minute patrol loop, the perfect flank shot that changed divisional doctrine. The Army had forgotten. History had moved on. In 1989, Helen died. Kovacs sold the house and moved into a retirement community in Erie, Pennsylvania. He brought the crate seat with him. The staff asked if he wanted it in his room. He said yes. They set it in the corner by the window. In 1993, a young military researcher named Captain Eric Halston was writing a dissertation on infantry anti-tank tactics in the European theater. He stumbled across a 1944 field modification order from the 29th Infantry Division that mentioned a Private D. Kovacs, inventor of rotational bazooka platform. The order had been misfiled in a logistics archive and forgotten. Halston tracked down Kovacs through VA records. He called the retirement home and asked to speak with him. Kovacs agreed to meet. Halston drove to Erie with a tape recorder, a notebook and a stack of photocopied field reports. They sat in the community lounge. Kovacs was 71 years old, thin, with hands still stained black from a lifetime of machine work. He sat on a plastic chair and waited. Halston asked him to describe the platform. Kovacs did. He described the wheel bearing, the ammo crate, the vision slots. He described the stone marker post, the 8-minute loop, the flank shot. He described teaching 10 men to build the platform, then 40 more, then 100. He described the way the bearing rotated without sound, the way you could track a vehicle through 180 degrees without moving your body, the way it saved lives. Halston asked why he built it. Because they kept dying, Kovacs said. Every time they moved, they died. Halston asked if he ever received recognition. No. Do you think you should have? Kovacs shrugged. I don't know. I just wanted it to work. Halston asked if he still had the original platform. Yeah. It's in my room. Can I see it? Kovacs led him upstairs. The crate seat was in the corner, next to a stack of old Popular Mechanics magazines. Halston crouched beside it, ran his hand over the wood, spun the bearing. It still rotated smoothly. 50 years old and it still worked. This should be in a museum, Halston said. It's just a crate, Kovacs said. It's not just a crate. It's a force multiplier. It changed the war. Kovacs looked at the platform. He didn't say anything for a long time. Maybe, he finally said. But the war's over. Halston finished his dissertation in 1994. He included a full chapter on the rotation fire platform and credited Kovacs by name. The dissertation was published by the Army War College Press and distributed to military libraries. It was read by 300 people. Kovacs never saw it. In 1998, the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of American History acquired a rotation fire platform from a private collector who had bought it at an estate sale in Virginia. The museum cataloged it as M44 Rotational Fire Platform, circa 1944, origin unknown. It was placed in storage. It has never been displayed. In 2001, Kovacs died of pneumonia. He was 79 years old. His obituary in the Erie Times-News mentioned that he was a veteran and a machinist. It did not mention the platform. His son donated the original crate seat to the local VFW hall. It sits in a back room next to a stack of folding chairs. Nobody knows what it is. The story of the rotation fire platform is not a story the Army tells. It does not appear in basic training manuals. It is not taught at West Point. There are no plaques, no memorials, no monuments. The men who used it are mostly dead now. The men who built it are forgotten. The man who invented it died without recognition in a rented room, holding a piece of wood and metal that once changed the shape of a war. But the legacy remains, buried in field reports and forgotten archives. Between June 1944 and May 1945, American forces in the European theater destroyed over 9,000 German armored vehicles. Tanks, half-tracks, self-propelled guns, armored cars. The majority were killed by airstrikes, artillery or tank-on-tank engagements. But a significant percentage, estimated at 11%, were destroyed or disabled by infantry anti-tank teams using bazookas, recoilless rifles or satchel charges. The survival rate of those teams improved dramatically in the second half of 1944. Casualty rates dropped. Kill rates rose. The change was not due to better training, better weapons or better tactics. It was due to a wooden crate with a wheel bearing and 6 vision slots, built by a machinist from Pittsburgh who understood rotation. The platform solved a problem the Army didn't know it had. Doctrine said bazooka teams should engage from cover and fire at frontal armor. But doctrine assumed the enemy would cooperate. The Germans didn't. They circled. They flanked. They moved. Doctrine didn't account for that. Kovacs did. His solution was elegant. It required no new technology, no factory production, no supply chain. It could be built in 6 hours by any soldier with a saw, a drill and an ammo crate. It cost $11.60. It weighed 30 pounds. It saved hundreds of lives. And the Army never said thank you. This is not unusual. The history of war is filled with forgotten innovations, tools and techniques that changed battles but never made it into the textbooks. The soldier who first used sandbags to stop shrapnel. The sergeant who figured out how to waterproof radios with condoms. The private who rigged a truck mirror to see around corners. These are not the stories we tell. We tell stories about generals and strategies and grand offensives. We do not tell stories about machinists who build crate seats. But those are the stories that matter. Because wars are not won by grand strategies. They are won by small solutions to immediate problems. They are won by men who refuse to accept that their friends have to die because doctrine says so. They are won by soldiers who look at a burned-out Jeep and see a wheel bearing, who look at an ammo crate and see a firing platform, who look at a predictable patrol route and see a kill zone. Daniel Kovacs was not a hero. He did not charge machine gun nests. He did not throw himself on grenades. He did not lead bayonet charges or rally broken units. He built a chair. That's all. A rotating chair with vision slots, built from garbage and genius, field-tested against an enemy that didn't know it was being hunted. And it worked. 14 vehicles destroyed. 9 mobility kills. 12 prisoners. 0 friendly casualties. Division-wide adoption. Theater-wide distribution. 1,800 platforms issued. Casualty rates dropped 41%. Kill rates increased 29%. First shot accuracy improved 23%. And nobody remembered. That is the cost of war. Not just the dead but the forgotten. The men who solved problems and saved lives and never got their names in the reports. The men who went home and worked lathes and died quietly, carrying the weight of things they could never explain. Kovacs carried that weight for 56 years. He carried it through frozen forests and burning villages and river crossings. He carried it home to Pittsburgh, into a machine shop, into a rented room above a butcher shop. He carried it through a marriage, a son, a quiet life of oil-stained hands and unspoken memories. He carried it to his death. And the platform sits in a VFW hall in Erie, Pennsylvania, gathering dust, mistaken for a stool. No one knows what it is. No one knows what it did. No one knows the name of the man who built it or the men who used it or the enemies it killed. The war moved on. History forgot. The Army archived the reports and retired the system and moved on to guided missiles and smart bombs and technologies that didn't require a machinist with a saw. But for 11 months in 1944 and 1945, in the forests and villages and fields of Europe, there was a weapon that didn't exist in any manual. A weapon built by hand, from scrap, by a man who understood that survival required innovation. A weapon that turned prey into predators, that gave static teams the ability to hunt mobile armor, that saved lives because one soldier refused to accept that his friends had to die. That weapon was a crate, a bearing and 6 slots. And it worked. The Germans never figured it out. They only knew that American bazooka teams were killing their vehicles with increasing efficiency. They wrote reports. They changed tactics. They tried new patrol routes. Nothing helped. The Americans kept tracking them, kept rotating, kept firing at the perfect moment. And the Germans kept dying. By the time the war ended, the platform had become so common that soldiers stopped noticing it. It was just part of the equipment. Just another tool. Just the thing you sat on when you waited for armor. No one thought to ask where it came from. No one thought to say thank you. And so Daniel Kovacs went home, built a life, and died in silence, carrying a secret the army never cared to record. This is his story. The story of a man who solved a problem, saved lives, changed doctrine, and received nothing. The story of a crate seat that won ambushes, killed vehicles, and disappeared into history. The story of an innovation that mattered, in a war that forgot. Private Daniel Kovacs, machinist, inventor, soldier. Born 1922. Died 2001. Buried in Erie, Pennsylvania, under a stone that says veteran, and nothing more. The crate seat survives him. It sits in a back room next to folding chairs in a VFW hall that no one visits. If you walk past it, you will not notice. It is just a wooden crate with a bearing and some slots. But once, in the summer of 1944, it killed a half-track at 70 meters. And that changed everything.